Welcome to Ready Set Exec, the podcast where we sit down with executives across North America to unpack their business, leadership, and expertise.
And every other week, join us for Market Watch, all things hiring, real insights and no fluff. Hey everyone, I'm here with Ryan Ross, marketer, founder, and thought leader with over a decade of experience helping professionals and organizations build authority, trust, and growth. He currently serves as head of marketing at BrokersBlock, helping benefits brokers across access innovative, highly vetted, non-BUCA carrier options, and the author of Benefits with Friends, a business novel about benefits and marketing. Ryan combines insights from media, advertising, and marketing to help leaders build credibility, focus, and impact. He's a membership chair for NAFA, New Jersey.
There we go. Happy to be here.
Yeah, that was a mouthful.
I know.
So one of the things we were sort of riffing off on the marketing side was using webinars to sort of build your business, right? So if people have listened to some of our other podcasts, we find with each kind of topic, we're trying to find something that's a little different to discuss on the marketing side. And so I like the webinar idea. It's something we've done with our company. We've done a monthly webinar for job seekers, right? Now, how you take those webinars and monetize them and create business opportunities is a whole other thing. Our events that we do are really just job seekers and helps our network and so on. But we haven't, let's say, taken it to the next level. But I'd love to hear sort of your take on how some industries can use it as a growth engine for their business, right?
Yeah. So I have come to realize that so many people consider webinars a 4-letter word, but I actually counted and it's actually 7 letters. So it's not a 4-letter word, highly underrated, biased because I love doing webinars, right? They're a great cornerstone content creator. I spent 10 years in the marketing automation world helping people make webinars. They're different than podcasts like this because if you do it right, you can see exactly who watches. So they're a great way to gauge the interest of your audience. Depending on the platform that you're using, they can be used for a lot of different things. But I think often people think of the webinar as like the most important part of the experience. But I think about it in terms of like the webinar is like the tree of life for marketing. And what do I mean when I say that? I mean, there's the webinar, which is like the trunk, right? But then there's all the promotions that go around the webinar itself. For example, you can have a webinar and it's CE approved, and we'll talk about that in a second, why that's so important. But that's going to be attractive to a lot of people, but they will never know that it's happening unless you tell them about it, right? So what our team does is we go and we identify, okay, what topic is of interest to brokers, right? And maybe it's like PBM transparency, because that is interesting if you're getting it approved for CE. So we created a webinar, it was approved for CE and it was on PBM transparency, but we need to tell people about it. We have a newsletter, so we market it that way, right? We have LinkedIn, so we market it that way. We send both posts out there. We say, hey, this webinar is happening on, March 3rd. It's going to be on PBM transparency. Great. But then you can DM people, which I think on LinkedIn, it's actually even more powerful than a post because, people might see the post and that's great. But when you reach out directly, you can say, hey, or here's a link, right? And that person, you're getting direct contact with them. But that is probably the most important thing that you can do for the webinar because you're adding value up front, right? They haven't even seen the webinar. All they know is John's reaching out to me and he's like, hey, we're having this webinar. And I'm like, oh, that's helpful, right? He's not just asking me for business. Yeah. He's giving me something of value first. So the promotion of the webinar is so important. Now, there's a couple different ways you can really use the asset itself to do post webinar follow-up. And that's kind of like the roots of the tree, right? If we're thinking about this tree of life. So you got the trunk, you got the promotions as the leaves, but then the roots are just as important because after the webinar happens, you can say, hey, everybody, we had this webinar. It was great. We talked about XYZ PBM transparency topic. And then you can create a lot of different assets from that cornerstone piece of content, the webinar, because what do you get? You get a transcript, right? Which is great. You throw it into ChatGPT and you can create 30 different LinkedIn posts from that, right? You're going to want to edit those to make them, your flavor of LinkedIn post. But you have that. You can then turn that webinar into a podcast and you put that on your podcast feed. So that's another piece of content, right? Or you can create a bunch of DMs on LinkedIn or wherever your social platform of choice is, Twitter, whatever, Facebook. And you can DM people that way. Say, hey, we had this webinar, et cetera, et cetera. It was really interesting and people liked it and we had this feedback. Now, if it is approved for continuing education, you can use that as both a promotion vehicle and as a follow-up vehicle saying, hey, we had the webinar and you were on it, right? If the people that actually showed up, I would say 30% of people might show up. If it's a CE webinar, you're going to get a lot less for a regular webinar, right? Non-CE, unless it has one specific element to it. And I'll get to that in a second. But if it's CE, you can follow up and say, hey, we processed your continuing education credits. And now you don't have to take any more CE, or now you have 2 CE credits that have been fulfilled, right? So people appreciate that. That opens the door for a conversation because that's really what we're trying to do here, right? With any sort of content marketing, we're trying to add value and open up the door for some sort of conversation, right? Now, I just talked about I dropped a couple Easter eggs in the sentence. One of them was, what's the one element that makes a CE webinar like just 10 times more effective? And that is a celebrity guest. I have a very specific framework for how to get celebrity guests on your webinars / podcasts. We did this last year with Mark Cuban. We reached out to him and we said, hey, do you want to come on and talk about PBM transparency, right? I'll send the link to everybody. And he spent 97 minutes. He said, yeah, let's do it, right? First of all, which was awesome. But he did it for a specific reason, which I'll get to in a second. He spent 97 minutes with us. Now, that is almost 100 minutes, right? If I'm doing my math correctly, that's almost 100 minutes. And in most states, that's going to be 2 CE credits. So if you have a webinar with a celebrity and it's CE, you could drive hundreds, maybe even 1,000 registrations to that topic, depending on what your business is, right?
Yep.
And the way to get a celebrity guest is I can't guarantee this because I don't want to, but you find somebody that is interested in speaking to an audience. They're good for the audience, but if they are trying to promote something, maybe they're trying to promote a company like Cost Plus Drugs. That's what Cuban's trying to promote, right? Maybe they're trying to promote a book like Never Eat, That'll Never Work. I interviewed the founder of Netflix because he was trying to promote a book, right? A lot of times authors, they're trying to get a book out there. That is a great reason to reach out to them. So if the timing works out where they need the audience and you are reaching out saying, hey, I'll give you some audience, they're so much more likely to actually say yes. And then you can leverage that celebrity connection into some form of content. Make it a webinar because then you can collect the data of who is watching and you can create so much other cornerstone or so much other waterfall content from that webinar, like shorter videos, clips, put it on YouTube as shorts, create LinkedIn posts, create emails. So I could literally talk about this for a long time, but I think webinars are definitely a growth engine if you do them right, if you realize that they are such an important piece of cornerstone content.
So a lot to unpack there, but I think one of the things, the first thing about is with your business, how are you growing it? So like your target audience, your ICP, right? You got to know who you're targeting for this. Yeah. So I like to use our example because it's easy to reference. So for us, we want to talk to operations executives, talent executives, and so on. So your thought about getting CE credits, I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting because SHRM and PHR, the HR accreditations, if we could get CE credits with a webinar, that would be a win, right? So just thinking our business right now. So to get the accreditation, like in your case, like you obviously you reach out to the associations, right? And there's going to be some stipulations about the course, the length, things like that. You got to adhere to get the credits.
Yeah.
Is there a fee you're having to pay, like in your case, to get accredited?
It depends on the state. right? We've
Okay.
done the various organizations that I'm involved with. I've done it through, sometimes it's done at the state level. Sometimes it's organization based, right? In financial services and insurance, we deal with a lot of states, but also maybe if you're getting yours approved for it's called the CFA, the CFA Institute. They have their own certified financial planner, CFP. They have their own. That's just organization based. But if it's a licensed profession, through a state, like insurance is usually licensed through the state. You're going to need to deal with the state directly, their Department of Insurance. And what happens is you need to first be approved as a CE provider, as a continuing education provider. Now, that could be for Nebraska, $10. Got approved for $10, right? New Jersey might be $500, right? Different states have different standards of what they will accept. You're always going to need to make sure that it's a business that's located in the state or in a reciprocal state, right? So Kansas is reciprocal to Missouri for insurance. And if you can say, hey, if we're approved in Missouri, then, this is reciprocal with Kansas, right? New Jersey, you need to fill out a 3-page form and send them an actual check in the mail, and you got to go through a whole rigmarole. So, like I said, it really depends on the state. It could cost between $10 and $500. Depends on the state.
And for your webinars,
Yeah.
with your business, I assume it's across the U.S. So are you having to register in every single state?
Yeah, you do have to register in every single state if you want to offer it in each state. So that can be kind of cumbersome, especially. Not only do you have to register yourself as a provider, but you need to register each class, each course you're giving out, right?
Yeah.
You need to get that approved. And then in order to get that approved, you're going to, again, depending on state, you're going to need to get it, you're going to need to send them the title, the number of credits, how you're offering it, right? Maybe it's in person. We've done pickleball events in person. Those are CE approved, which was pretty fun. Or if it's webinar based, you need to say it's a live seminar, right? But if it's like self-study, so you're just like watching a video on demand, you need to show okay, this is on demand, but they're always going to ask how do you prove that somebody watched it? So you can say, we give them a test, or during the webinar, if we're doing a webinar, they need to say, okay, there's 2 keyword questions that people need to fill out with the right keywords. And it's just a poll you put up on Zoom effectively. But you need to say, this is what we're doing. So you need to have webinar policies, and you need to have learning outcomes. The learning outcomes are really important, because if you can't say the audience will learn X, Y, Z, then they're never going to approve it, because they want to make sure that they know what the audience is going to learn. And does this align with the things that somebody in insurance will actually need to know, right? So if you send them all the right stuff, title, promotion schedule, promotion assets, the transcript, maybe I try to give them as much as possible in order to get it approved. But then that could be between $20 and $50 per class. Then there's another fee. This is all kind of right? There's always a fee, right?
Government bureaucracy at its best.
There's another fee, but you'll find 3 times as many people actually register, and 50% more actually watch it. So it is worth it if you can actually make it worth it. But the last fee is it's probably going to be $1 per maybe $2 per person for the people that actually watch it, so that they get their CE, and that's probably administrative fee. Let's be honest, right? So there's a couple fees involved.
Long story short, you do need to do some back end work here to get your webinar that you want to host approved with let's say the authorities. To allow you to be able to offer credits for it, but it does drive attendance sky high, right?
You'll get 3 times as many people registering for it, and you'd think that you get 100% of people registering actually viewing, but scheduling conflicts come up, so it might be 50 to 80% of people actually watch it, which is still way higher than a regular webinar, right? Even if the topic is boring. PBM transparency sounds really dull, but if it has CE attached to it, even better. If it has a celebrity attached to it, even better, right? And that's definitely driven revenue for us.
Okay, so you're doing the webinars, and then it's not only the webinar, it's the follow-up, it's the sort of the nurture campaign we put these people in, right? Because these people that you're trying to invite to your webinar are your ICP for your business. And this can apply across several businesses, from recruitment to what you're doing to a lot of different things, right? So for people listening right now, it's like, think about your business. Do you have an ICP that you want to reach? Is there education that they would appreciate? Get it accredited, do the
Yeah.
back end stuff, and go after them, right?
I would say that one thing you just mentioned was really important, right? Is
Yeah.
it topics that they're actually interested in?
Yeah.
Because sometimes I got to coach people on this a lot. Sometimes people, they say, oh, I got a great idea for this article or blog or webinar or podcast, but the Venn diagram needs to cross over in terms of like
Yeah.
what people want to watch and what you can create, right? That it's got to cross over. There are specific tools to know what that is. And it's like Google Trends. You can use a lot
Yeah.
of different keyword searching to figure out like, what are people searching about? And how can I create content that answers those questions? This is what it's all about, answering questions.
No, and that's a key thing, because we forget that as much as it is educational, it's also entertainment, in a sense of like, we have to entertain people. We got to bring them to the, bring them to the stadium. If you build it, they will come, but you got to have the right show.
Yeah.
So, okay. So that's a lot of things you can do. Obviously, you have a marketer or contact you to help you brainstorm ideas to how to build a webinar.
Yeah.
So you run these webinars, then there's a nurture sequence. Basically, the whole idea is you have now a trapped audience. You have their contact info. You're able to target them with continuous marketing and so on, and they become part of a community, let's say, right? Um, are these paid webinars? Are they free, or
Ours are usually free, right? In so many
Oh, okay.
cases, the ones we've run for BrokersBlock are free, and the ones we run for NAFA are free. Sometimes in order to be a member of NAFA, there is a charge, but that's just a membership fee, right? And I suppose with so many membership organizations, you're paying a fee and you're getting some value for that fee, right? That membership fee. And now for businesses, there is an expectation that afterwards you're going to be doing some business with that organization.
Yeah.
We don't say like, hey, brokers, if you watch our webinars, you got to send us some RFPs. But we're going to stay in contact because we think we have a good value proposition for these brokers, and we think we can add value to what they're doing.
Yeah.
And we're going to stay in contact because when the scope comes across and the timing is right for them, we want them to consider us as an option. So we have a newsletter that we add everybody that's signed up for the webinar to. And that newsletter, at the top of every single newsletter, there's a button that says, you got a tough case, send it our way. Right? Maybe they use
totally
it, maybe they don't.
sense.
Yeah. Just because we want to make sure that they know that we're open for business, but we're never going to be like, hey, so you went to that webinar, right? Come on, give us some stuff. No, it can't be like that, right? There's no coercion here.
Of course.
It's just value.
So maybe what were some best practices you'd recommend for webinar? Like if you're hosting one, length, duration, speakers, format, what works best?
So generally, I would say 30 to 45 minutes. If it's CE, then there is a specific requirement to have it at least, depending on the state again, it's always state dependent, 50 minutes, 50 minutes. And that's for 1 hour credit. So that's the general duration. I would always use polling in your webinars if you can. And I'm usually talking about Zoom when I talk about webinars because that's pretty ubiquitous, but there's last I counted, 35 different webinar platforms, and most of them enables polling. And why is polling important? It's because this allows you to generate a much more enriched version or enriched picture of who your audience is, right? You can say, because if you're, let's say, or a benefits broker, right? Okay, what size groups do you usually do business with? A group is just the size of a company, right? Oh, we're 0 to 10, we're 11 to 20, we're 50 plus, whatever, right? Yeah. So using polling gives you an idea of who's in the audience and what they're looking for. And you can use various questions, etc. I'll promote it 3 weeks out. That gives people some time to schedule things, follow up, add everybody to a follow-up sequence. There's a really cool function in Zoom that after the webinar happens, after you close it down as the host, you close down the webinar, you can, by default, it brings you to just, the post-webinar Zoom page, which is Zoom, but you can update that. You can have that be your own landing page. So you can drive people directly to a landing page on your site that they can engage with stuff after the webinar. Because what does everybody do during a webinar? They're like, oh, hey, do you got the deck for this? Everybody asks this. Have the deck as a follow-up email, but you can also put it on the site. Now, the pros are going to be, they're going to put a pixel on that post-webinar site, because if they're doing any Facebook or LinkedIn advertising, you can put a pixel on that site and you can retarget people after the fact, right? So you can put using the post-webinar URL, and I think that's in like the branding section of Zoom. That's a really, really good tool to you can direct people where you want to go after the webinar. So those are 3 or 4 things that I would say are really important with webinars.
Well, you need to have a pro Zoom account, I believe, to have those features, right? So
You need to have pro, or at least the webinar package, and it's going to be like $89 a month,
yeah.
But depending on what your like average client yearly value is, it's probably going to be worth it.
All right, so we can basically add some functionality with Zoom Pro accounts there to send a link or continue on the interaction with the people that were at the webinar. Then, of course, put them into a nurture sequence with email follow up and so on, right? So I get that. So this would apply to certain industries. I think any kind of professional service, or where there's, if you're dealing with people that have a accreditation like finance, HR. I wouldn't, maybe to a certain extent, sales as well. There's definitely a lot of different opportunities for training.
I would say licensed professionals is probably the best industry, or like industry. That's not an industry, but like the best type of individual to target. Or if you're targeting people that have licenses that need continuing education, it's a really good way to do it. Financial services has a lot of licenses or accreditations. Some of them are total bullshit. If you don't need CE, then I wouldn't say that that's a credit or a license worth getting. But any licensed profession that needs continuing education, this is like it's a great way to generate more engagement with that audience.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and definitely some food for thought for our audience if they haven't tried something in terms of like their marketing stack of like. What is your go-to-market, right? Add this in maybe as a way to target them. One thing we were definitely discussing too was, in certain industries, people are not so visible. So I'd say finance for sure. Like I don't see people in finance posting on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
There's certain industries that are very conservative minded, let's say.
Yeah.
And I think we did discuss how like being brand visible now is like so more important.
Yeah.
For people in 2026, because, well, let's face it, like everything's social media now. And so if you're not visible, your brand, like part of your brand is also your personal brand, but then your company brand, right? There's both.
Yeah.
But if they're both not visible, that could be a problem. So for certain audiences, I'm sure there's also certain personality types in those audiences, right? Not to say everybody's a monolith and everyone who's in finance is an introvert, but you do get certain personality types that tend to be in, certain industries. So how do you start to get them to be more brand visible? And let's say finance, insurance, some of these drier kind of industries, let's say,
So I would say it's going to be specifically for these highly regulated industries. I think that often people use that regulation as a reason to not post things online because they don't want to get their wrist slapped. And that makes a lot of sense because the rules are always changing. They might be nebulous and people just don't get it, right? But I would say that visibility is the way to create trust, right? And the more visible you are, the more people see your face over and over and over again. This is just celebrity culture, right? The more people see your face, the more likely they are to trust you. And when they see your face all the time, and then you see them in public, you're like, oh, I already know this guy, which is so surreal. And I'm not saying that happens to me a lot, but I have a podcast that I just do for fun in my town. And some guy drives past me one day. He's like, Ryan. And I'm like, this guy's my neighbor. I don't really talk to him because he lives up a weird street. But he's like, oh, I listen to your podcast. That's great. And I'm like, my mind was blown. But because I'm out there, people hear my voice and they know that this is the podcast that I do. They get recognized, right? And I'm not saying I get like special seats at a restaurant or anything. Actually, we did an episode on a restaurant and the hostess bought us a round of drinks, which was so strange. But my point here is that being visible creates trust, especially in financial services. That's the world where I live in insurance, benefits, healthcare. These are the places where you need to establish trust, because trust is definitely a rare commodity. And you do that by maintaining visibility. Not only does that help with your own personal brand, but if you're a leader at a company, it's helpful from two perspectives. First perspective is finding new clients, right?
Yeah.
You're out there, your brand is out there. People will be like, oh, I know of them. And when you get an email from that company, you're like, I guess I'll take the call. You know, I worked at a large financial services media company called Barron's Magazine. It's part of Dow Jones. And I was at a conference, and one of the editors was on stage talking about why they're unique. And I can't remember the question, but the guy was like, you know what? At the end of the day, it's good to be us because people pick up our phone calls. They're not trying to get in to speak with these senior executives because they pick up the phone when these guys call them. I had a colleague, he used to work at the FBI, and then he was working in real estate a few years later. And he's like, man, this is the hardest I've ever worked, because when I would call and say I was from the FBI, he's like, I would never be hung up on, right?
Yeah.
Because people know the FBI. So the more visible you are, and you can do that within the regulations of the industry. You don't need to talk, if you're in financial services, if you're in insurance, you don't need to talk about stock picks, right? You would never want to talk about guaranteeing an asset class to go up, but you can talk about like what your specific industry focus is. So one of my clients, he's a financial advisor, and he is focused on the wine and spirits industry. Now, you can talk a lot about the wine and spirits industry and never talk about stock picks, and that's going to be totally fine because you're not making any guarantees. But consistently getting out there is really good for making sure that you elevate your personal brand. Creating content that educates people is a really good way to do this. Answering the questions that they already have, to touch upon a point we made earlier. It's a really good way to just make sure people know that, oh, this guy's adding value to the market. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that it's great for recruitment. If you're trying to find some new salespeople, or if you're trying to find an associate and people know you from social media or whatever, or you're speaking on stage somewhere, they're like, wow, I really want to work with that guy. I want to work with her, because they're there and they seem like a lot of fun to work with. They're gonna reach out to you or make it easier for you to connect with them so that you can grow your company. So I think visibility, it creates trust, and trust makes things a lot easier down the line, just from answering people's questions and getting out there, even if you need to be a little bit vulnerable. And that's the hardest part.
So I guess the biggest thing we kind of hear about this is people saying, well, I don't want to be an influencer. You know, I mean, for me, one of the biggest hang-ups to doing any kind of social stuff, which you kind of eye roll about it, is like not wanting to be one of those, I don't want to do the TikTok dance. You know what I mean? So for conservative industries, or like industries where there's serious people here, where, you know, they're not here to do reels. Like, that's not their thing, even though they kind of have to create like viral content a little bit to get some traction. Like, how do you police, or what would you give them advice in terms of how they present themselves? What kind of content they're creating? You know, like, how do they go about doing this without becoming like a meme, you know?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think the word, if you replace the word in your mind, influencer, with just media executive, people like that a lot more, right?
Yeah, that sounds better.
It doesn't need to be all the time, right?
Sounds better.
But I think you need to say, for this hour a week, or however much you create content, I'm going to be a media executive, and I own a media company, and that company is a part of my larger company. And that company's purpose is to create content for the larger company, right?
Yeah.
So you put your media executive hat on and say, all right, what are we going to talk about today? And it's not dancing, unless you like dancing, but you figure out, okay, what are people asking? So it really just comes down to, okay, I need to get my head around the idea that we own a media company and we produce content because this is a great way for us to create visibility and trust. And so just that simple switch in terms of what you consider yourself to be, because, you know, you think about it too, right? Like an influencer, when you think of the word influencer, you think of, you know, some chick in like a North Face jacket drinking a Starbucks in her car, talking about what it's like at the drop off for daycare, right? And that has a specific thing to it. But who doesn't want to be influential to a lot of other people?
Yeah.
Right? Who doesn't want to influence other people to, hire them, right? Or to work for them, right? I think being influential is the better way to think about it, right? Creating a media company within your company is a better way to think about it than saying, oh, I'm an influencer and that's my job on Instagram. No, you own a media company. And if we think about it that way, it makes creating the content seem like it's an investment rather than something you have to do.
Yeah, titles matter, and how you approach the problem is a big part of that. So that's what I'm going to say from now on. I'm a media executive. There you go.
That's way better.
I mean, it does. It sounds way better than, I make TikTok reels for my business.
Yeah, there's a I think it's a show called Jury Duty with this guy. It was like do you see this? There's a reality show, and everybody was in on the reality show. They made like a courtroom scene, and this guy, he's the only one that doesn't know that it is an actual fabrication of a show, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the actors, she goes up into the defendant's docket or whatever seat, and they're asking her questions, and she's like, oh, I'm an influencer, and I run the Instagram page for my dog, and also I have a mayonnaise company, and also I do this. And I think that's who we think of when we think influencer.
Yeah.
But if the person was like a media executive, you think like Kris Kardashian. Yeah, the Kardashians, they're influencers, but she is a media executive, and they run a media empire that influences billions of people. And that is so cool. And I've watched her masterclass, and it is a masterclass in how to run a media empire. So people just need to start thinking about how they're going to build their media empire, and they'll go a lot further.
Yeah, no, it's fair enough. And I mean, I think, and this sort of gets into our next topic of like, as a leader, or founder in any of these companies, like we're all trying to do a lot. And it's like learning how to say no to certain things, managing our pipeline of all these things we've got to do. Because now not only do we have to run a business, we also have to be a media executive, which that chews up a lot of time, I tell you. Having done it now with our podcasts and everything else, it chews up a lot of my time. I enjoy it, but it's like you add another thing to your plate, And so what advice do you have for like, executives that are trying to, have that focus with their business?
Yeah.
Being able to say no to too many things and having that strategic sort of mindset with operations and how they're running things.
Yeah. Well, I would say the best way to prioritize things is by having a couple kids, because then you're like, all right, daycare's open. What's the first thing I have to do? Right.
Yeah.
And then so it's just about prioritization. Okay. What are the biggest goals I have? And honestly, for me, what I do is I'm thinking, what's the biggest pain in the ass that I got to figure out today? Right. What's going to be chewing at me if I don't do it first? And I do that thing first. Right. Yeah. But you kind of consolidate time into shorter time spans as well, because you can have an hour meeting on the calendar. Google just defaults to like hour-long meetings. They usually don't need to be an hour. They can be 15 minutes. Are we making decisions here, or are we brainstorming, right? Some things just don't need to take as long as they actually do. So I think a lot of it is about, realizing you got a finite amount of time. You have a huge list of things you got to do. What is the thing that I could push forward a little bit that will cross the most annoying thing on my list off that list, and then push everything else out? Because like you said, being able to say no to a lot of things, sometimes they just resolve themselves, right? But there's always going to be something that's absolutely necessary to do. And those are those most high leverage things you got to be doing. Sometimes that might be hiring somebody, right? That might be, recruiting finding a contractor, right? Or doing some big chunk of work first that makes everything else a lot easier to do. So prioritization, realizing that you got only a few hours in the day to actually get real work done, and using the tools you have to actually do that.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that always comes to mind for me anyways is like putting your focus on what you're best at, and your superpower, and being able to align on that. And so a lot of times, one of the pushbacks we hear is, well, I can do it myself for a lot. I can do it myself. I do better myself. A lot of founders don't want to let go.
Yeah.
And I've seen this on the management side where they're like, they hire people, but they don't want to let go of the certain aspects of the job because they feel like they can do it better. So it's like being able to delegate is a big skill, I think, and being able to trust others to actually execute, allowing people to fail if they need to, right?
I feel like it's the hardest thing too, because I know there's some things I'm good at and some things I'm just not. I should not be wasting my time on this. And that's something I definitely struggle with, trying to over-engineer something myself, because I'm like, I could do this in 10 seconds, but knowing like, okay, that's actually not a priority right now. If I don't do it till tomorrow, it's probably going to be okay. And then focusing on the thing that I am good at and the thing that I can action myself. And like I said, the thing that I'm going to be, it's going to be gnawing at me for a while. That's usually the thing I got to get done first. But yeah, knowing what your strengths are, knowing what you're not good at. And I think being honest with yourself about those things is really important.
Yeah. And sometimes you got to spend some money. I mean, spending money to get certain tasks off your plate because it's just chewing your productivity down, right? Like so for us, one thing that comes to mind is video editing. There's so much content we have. The video editing, outsourcing that, right? So luckily we've been able to bring on
that can take up so much time.
Yeah. I mean, it's these little things. You're like, yeah, I can do it. Of course, you can probably do a lot of things, but do you want to? And, the ones that are maybe the biggest pain in the ass that can be outsourced, like if you can get it off your plate, especially as an exec where you're like, I only have so many hours in a week. And for those of us that have kids, like I have 3 myself, and I'm sure you do too.
How old are your kids?
So I have twins. They're 7, and I have a 14-year-old daughter. And between the 3 of them, I mean, it's mayhem.
Yeah, I bet it is. I got a 1-year-old and a 3.5, and
there you go.
But I'll go back to my original point, right? You realize, okay, to me, the time I have to myself is so much less than when I didn't have kids, right?
Yeah.
But that actually helps out a lot, because I can say like, all right, this is going to get done today. This is going to get done some other time or by somebody else, right? These are the things that I can do myself uniquely. And it really helps you prioritize, because you're like, oh, well, I'm not going to do that today, or somebody else is going to do it. And you just know that early. It just comes down to prioritizing.
Well, prioritizing, and I think when you have a family too, it's like your priorities revolve around them because their schedule's set, right? Like daycare, for example, there's set drop off and pickup. So you have to like set your whole day up around that because that's what it is.
Yeah.
And so I think having the flexibility to do that is great. I mean, for me, that's why I like working remote and why I like running my own business, because I can work when I need to and work around that. But for other people that have more strict schedules, it's like that's part of the compromise and how you figure that out, right? So
yeah, there's more risk, but also you don't have to. You can make your own schedule.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, unless you have a client that's like just calling you all the time, which is a good problem to have. But we pick our battles.
Yeah, I mean, I remember during COVID having meetings and having literally my newborn twins on my lap as I was running meetings with teams and so on. And I mean, we all have to make sacrifices when you.
But everybody gets it. You're like, here we are.
Yeah, no, it's a thing, and I think for the most part, most people like they get it, but how soon we forget. It's like already we see the push to back to office and hybrid and whatnot, and some employers are not seeing it that way, but that's a battle they're going to fight and see how the market responds from a staffing point of view and people leaving and so on, right? One thing we did mention though is, for a lot of these companies, they haven't niched down enough. I think one of the problems maybe as a new founder or startup is like, your thought is, I don't want to leave money on a table, so I want to be more generalist or more open to other things, like if there's other customers, because, well, it's business. Business is business. But many times not being niche enough can hurt us, right?
Yeah. So I have some very specific thoughts on this. And I read a book called The Ultimate Sales Machine by Chet Holmes. And it's about sales, yes, but sales is a lot about like figuring out who exactly does this tool solve the problem of. And oftentimes people will say, I want to help tech founders. That's such a big list of people. And I think this guy talks about this concept of the Dream 100 in this book. And I think it's so important to think about this. I have some clients and they have, they might have 25 clients themselves, but maybe they have 50 or 75 or 100. And so I asked them, like, what if your client list doubled? And oftentimes that would mean like, oh, this is a great thing and I need to expand my business and find help, etc. So when they say, oh, I want to help anybody with over $500,000 in AUM or whatever, it's a huge list. But if you can whittle it down to 100 and niche it down and say, I only want to help these types of people. I was talking about one of my clients and they help credit unions. Oh, they help the wine and spirits industry.
Yeah.
Another client, he helps credit unions. Another guy, only med tech sales reps. Still, those are big numbers. But if you whittle it down to a list of 100 people, those are the people you go after. You figure out ways to get in front of those people because you can just mail those people something in the mail. But what also this lets you do is it really gives you a higher resolution on what their challenges are. And that's how you add value. When you solve somebody's challenge, you really figure out, like, how do I speak to them about that challenge? Because in any industry, there's going to be acronyms. And if you know those acronyms, then people will be like, oh, we're in the same club. So figuring out what that specific niche is so powerful because it helps you make a lot of decisions along the way. In my Benefits with Friends book, the protagonist, it's a narrative book about benefits and marketing. And the protagonist, his name is El Dente, and he's like, oh, I can be the benefits broker for all these types of companies. And his mentor says to him, no, you got to pick 100 people and stick to that, right? And he's like, well, I don't want to pigeonhole myself. And he's like, the character comes from a manufacturing of pasta background, right? He was a pasta manufacturer. So he understands the manufacturing world. And he's like, how many manufacturers do you think are out there, right? This is what his mentor says to him. He's like, how many manufacturers do you think there are? And he goes like, I don't know. And they look it up, and it's 600,000 manufacturers exist in the U.S. Now, 3% of people are looking to change vendors every year, right? So that even if it's 100,000 people, right, 1/6 of that list, that is 3,000 companies that are possible for him to do business with. So I think people really underestimate the size of the market that they want to go after, when really they should be thinking, okay, I want to work with 100 companies or 100 individuals. And then it's a very much more manageable list, an approachable list that they can go after. And that's how you figure out, okay, who do I need to call? And you have a list of people that you need to call. And if you can get through that list with even like a 1% conversion rate, that is one more client. And you tell everybody else, hey, I'm working with this guy. And they're like, oh, you're working with him? And assuming you did good work, they might refer you to somebody else that's in their industry. And that's a really good way to just get a foot in.
No, that totally makes sense. And I mean, I think for a lot of businesses, that's the failure to understand their TAM, their total market. Mm-hmm. Doing some research, you can find like your market's bigger than you think, and there's a lot of players in there. And how many can you actually service, even if you grow? And I mean, there's a thought of, okay, well, you can maybe do offshoot businesses later, right? Once your brand is good. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's another thing to think about, is we can go into these other areas once we need to, but having market saturation, like where you're a known player in the market, that's a huge thing. You get a lot more business as well, just by name recognition.
Yeah.
I was reading a study there saying, in a downturn market, customers tend to flock to known brands, known names, right? Because you're more risk averse in a down market. So you're picking you go to the grocery store, you're picking the Tide, you're picking Procter & Gamble product, whatever. You're picking the things you know and have bought for a long time. So becoming that name in the market is a big benefit to you, even if it's a smaller niche, right?
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting, I hadn't heard of that study, but it makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, well, it's one thing that they said was, because risk aversion goes up when it's a down market, because every dollar you have to spend is, there's limited amounts, like you're cutting back your budget. So if you have a limited budget, you're going to say like, okay, well, I can't risk on these vendors that I don't know. I got to make sure I get a prop. Like It's like when you're hungry,
you don't.
you go to McDonald's when you're hungry, right? And you only got like $10 in your pocket. You're like, well, I know at McDonald's I can get a full Happy Meal for $5, so I'm going to go there.
Yeah.
The other restaurant, I don't know what the prices are. I don't know if it's good, and
Yeah,
I only got $10 to spend. So let's just
are they going to give you food poisoning?
Human nature, right?
Yeah. How interesting.
So that's definitely part of niching down. But interested in your book there, Benefits with Friends. When I heard the title, I was like,
yeah,
what kind of book is this about?
So
maybe like what gave you the idea to, because this is, as you said, it was a protagonist, right? So it's like a fictional story. Is it a fictional story, or is it based on you?
Story.
Okay, it's a fictional story.
No, it's not based on me. I read a book years ago called The Goal, which was by a guy named Elihu Goldratt, I think, and that was about manufacturing. I do not have a manufacturing background, but it told a story about how to like create operational efficiencies. I read another book called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. Very similar, right? It's a narrative book about a team that needs to figure out how to operate well together. And then there's another one about Built to Sell, about a guy who had to sell a company. But these were all books about people, and they had problems, and any narrative arc has, current situation, problem, or inflicting element, problem. Okay, you solved it, problem, you solved it, right? You're creating tension, and then you're resolving that tension. And it's a really good way to keep people interested in a book. And if you can infuse that story with elements of your industry, it's a really good way to inform people of that. So I'd always wanted to write a book about using this kind of concept of teaching business while telling a story. Yeah. And so I needed to learn about the benefits industry, because I'm head of marketing at BrokersBlock, and I'm a founding partner of what we're calling the new BrokersBlock, because we've added a service offering of marketing. Right. Yeah. We're combining our benefits expertise with marketing expertise for brokers that need marketing help. And so I needed to learn more about the benefits industry, because I didn't know anything about it. Right. Yeah. And so I thought, okay, maybe I'll just interview some thought leaders in the space and say, like, well, tell me about the benefits industry. And I slowly learned more about it. And I read books, and I interviewed the authors of those books or articles, etc. And I took that. And then I said, okay, this character needs a problem. So the character, he runs into a problem at the beginning of the book, and he has to build a benefits business, a benefits brokerage business. So in order to do that, yes, you need to know about benefits. And he learns about benefits by speaking with the people that I spoke with. But he also needs to learn how to grow his business. So he learns about how to market the business. And so we talk about webinars, yes. We talk about speaking gigs and getting in front of your audience, and how to do that, and how to create websites, etc., and what needs to be on them, and how to optimize your LinkedIn pages, etc. And he learned these things throughout the book. I thought this would be a really good way to learn about the benefits industry, share information on how to market your benefits brokerage, or any business really, but this is for benefits brokers. So I'm like, okay, let me just write this, and maybe I'll learn some things myself too. And I did. I don't know if I'd recommend writing a book, because it can be a real pain in the ass, because you got to write it, and you got to edit it, and you got to market it, and which is fun to do, because I'm in marketing, but it's a really good way to just get a deep dive on what your industry is, and share that information with other people. And it is a great sales tool, because I can send this to people and say, you should read this book, right?
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. And I mean, it's interesting how you use it also as a learning opportunity for yourself, right? Like, to learn an industry. Because I mean, in our business too, like, we're going into new verticals all the time, and we're having to learn like the whole vertical. You're like, I've never recruited in this vertical before, but you can learn it. And it's like, as you said, the acronyms, the sort of tech speak that they have. Yeah. If you watch Star Trek, you hear all the little technological terms they make up, but in certain industries it sounds like that, So it's interesting kind of thing. One of the things you did mention about the book, though, was like the peer-driven learning, and like people learning from each other, and that kind of thing. Like, why is that important, for like industry knowledge and whatnot?
Yeah, well, I would say, first of all, it's good to just chat with your industry about what their challenges are, right? And figure out how you can add value. But we all want to be able to learn more about what we do in the industry or what other people do, because then you get empathy. And I would say the other thing is that being able to find people that you might not have the opportunity to talk with. This is a really good way to do that. Whether that's hosting a podcast or hosting a webinar or writing a book, most people are much more approachable if you reach out to them with a specific ask and say, hey, I want to talk to you about this, and this is where our conversation is going, right? People are way more amenable to speaking with you about that, especially if you're curious and do research on it. Right? If you're interviewing like a high profile guest, doing a lot of research up front to figure out like, okay, what have they been asked already? How do I marry what they're talking about in general or what they want to be selling themselves to what I want to know, forces you to get a really deep understanding of them, because then you can ask really good questions and you just might gain a new friend as well. So that's what I would say.
Nice. So when you were writing the book, like you interviewed a lot of people in the industry, and what, like, how did you have to storyboard the whole thing? Like, how did you go about doing this?
Well, I had the general concept that I wanted to talk about in my head. And I will tell you at the end of the book, I will say that AI definitely helped me write the book, right? I'm not good at dialogue, but I understand how to craft a story. So I definitely collaborated with ChatGPT to write it. There was a lot of things that I had to do in order to make it a functional story, because ChatGPT is not good at remembering a lot of things, but it can help you with dialogue. I had the general idea of the story. I had the key points I wanted to make in the story, right? Like, we had to start out and say, okay, this guy, actually, the plot changed a little bit at the beginning, because initially he had his own benefits brokerage and he was like trying to build it and he was getting disrupted by technology. And I'm like, why would he need to learn more about the benefits industry? And so I thought, okay, I really need to adjust this arc itself. So at the beginning, his dad dies and he needs to take over his dad's benefit industry and he needs to learn about benefits. So that's how I had to adjust the whole plot.
Yeah.
Right?
How do you add in the education piece without it
I'm like, why would he need to learn about benefits at all? Right? I could talk all day about how he markets himself, but if I'm teaching people about benefits, because the audience is, yes, benefits brokers, but also advisors that need help with benefits because they're adding that as a service item. And I needed to learn about benefits myself. So I had the core story arc. AI helped me with dialogue, etc. And then a lot of the fun was figuring out, like, okay, how do I inject like some humor into the book? So originally the character's name was, I think, Mark or something. But then I'm like, no, he's got to have a food name. So I named him Al Dente, which is hilarious to me because it's like well-cooked pasta. And then his mentor's name was like Dave, but I'm like, no, we're going to name him Porterhouse because that's a good cut of meat, right? And I like Texas Roadhouse. I'm going to say it's one of the best restaurants in the country, one of the most approachable steakhouses. So they go to Texas Roadhouse a bunch, which is awesome. Yeah. And then the people that I would meet, I would tell them about the book, and they're like, you should have this guy be French because I made his name Jim Chalet. His real name is Jim Lodge, but I'm like, we're going to elevate him a little bit, make him a chalet, not a lodge. So I had an interview, and they're like, you should give him a French accent. So I gave him a French accent in the book, right? So I was able to inject a lot of humor into the book, and that was a lot of fun. That made it more fun to write.
Yeah.
But
well, I mean, I can also imagine you're taking a topic, I mean, benefits, which is not the most exciting, hot topic people want to read about, and making it more accessible, making it a little funny. Yeah. I mean, I get that because, like, if it was just a book about benefits, it's like, unless you're really into it, benefits, like, it's not my number one. You know,
they're few and far between. And just really quickly, because I know we got to go. One of the things that was fun about writing the book is, as I would talk to people, different scenarios would come up when they were telling me analogies about the book, about their specific angle of benefits. And one of them was like a bowling alley. They're like, oh, self-funding is like, or level funding, one of the two, is like putting up bumpers on your bowling lane. Right. Yeah. And I'm like, well, there you go. We're going to have this conversation be at a bowling alley. And so it was. I put them in a bowling alley. Right. That's a really fun thing to do with a book. You can just create different environments to put people in. And that's the analogy in the book. Right. So it makes it a little bit more real. And there's an analogy about a mattress store going out of business, talking about network discounts. So you get to be very creative in how you create a world with to tell the story, to make the points hit home and like drive home a lot better.
Well, to finish off, maybe I'll ask you, what's your favorite steak when you go to the Roadhouse?
Oh.
How does it have to be done? And
yeah, well, the porterhouse, man, medium rare, and then you know what? I went there on my birthday, and of all the things that I love about Texas Roadhouse, I would say the thing that I don't love that much, you got to ride on a saddle and like whip a napkin around your head on your birthday. So maybe don't do that. But they do have really, really cold beer, and it pairs very nicely with the porterhouse steak.
There you go. Well, that sounds good. For me, I'm more of a prime rib. Give me an 18-ounce prime rib with horseradish. I'm good.
Wow.
A little more rare than medium, but yeah, we're good.
Did I say medium? I definitely meant medium rare.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, that's well, one of the things this porterhouse says, he's like, well done. Well done. Well done, al dente. That's great.
Well, thanks for the great conversation. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, John. I'll talk to you later.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.